the insanity that is keeping you broke. All right, we're going to get into this one, but before we do, if you find my content valuable, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. We're on a drive here. I'm actually driving to work, but we're going to go over this one, the insanity that is keeping you broke. All right, we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about those things that are outside of your control and the things that are inside of your control. And there's some insanity that is contributing to both of those things. Now let's start with outside of you. What is going on? There's many things that are going on that are beyond your control. And I look at the president now and this current administration, and I kind of look at some of the policies and the things that they've implemented, and I look at it kind of like a Jenga game. If you've ever played that Jenga where you have that tower of blocks that's set up, and you have to take your turn removing those blocks. And usually you would remove those blocks carefully, one at a time, and being very, very surgical about how you do that. Well, the current administration is removing Jenga blocks very, very quickly. They're implementing big things and removing blocks really, really fast. They're removing the tariff block when the tariffs were implemented. We're doing the mass deportations, which affects the economy in a lot of different ways. Workers, even who have the documentation to be at work, they have temporary work status and have their paperwork, they're afraid because people are just being snatched up and sent off into these prison type situations, even if they have the proper paperwork. So people are scared and just not showing up to work. And so these places like construction sites do not have the workers that they need because these folks are afraid to come to work. And when you have that situation where people are afraid to come to work, then you have a very, very difficult situation on your hands as far as keeping your work situation stable. And some companies have even failed due to this situation. I'm stopping now. I have some business at the bank, so I'm going to stop the car and talk to you a little bit directly here. So we have the deportations. So that's another layer that's happened with this administration. All right. And you've had the layoffs with DOGE. That's what I was actually thinking about, of government jobs. And you think in the past, government jobs were this segment of employment. And in fact, the government is the largest employer that we have. And people who had government jobs kind of thought of those jobs as very, very safe. As you know, a government worker would think, hey, this is a job I can have for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and in fact have a full career with the government, even in an environment now where people move from job to job. Why is this important? Because it's stability. These government workers are the very type of people who could go get something like a home mortgage and think, yes, I'm going to have stable employment that I can count on, that's going to have a paycheck that's consistent, that I actually know how much I'm bringing in. And also the mortgage companies would feel confident with a government worker that they could sustain those payments over time. What's happened? There's been a mental shift with government workers. They're like, I don't know anymore whether I'm going to have my job long term. So they're in the same type of limbo that's now in the private sector. Now you might say, hey, they need to be under that kind of scrutiny or stress so that they maintain a high level of production or a high level of efficiency and do their jobs well. Well, a lot of the government workers who are coming out of government and going into the private sector, what folks are learning is that these people are highly skilled and these people are good at what they do. And now they're actually competing against some of these people who have lost their job due to this other block being pulled out of the Jenga tower of them being laid off or their job being eliminated when the whole DOGE thing was going on, okay? So you had that. The layoffs in the government and also in the private sector, but the government is huge because there are so many workers in the government. And now you throw on top of all of that, this military action that's going on in Iran. It looks like a war to me, but the administration and the president are calling it an excursion or military action. They have a lot of different ways that they're putting it. Well, this military action is causing a problem in that Strait of Hormuz. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, where ships are not able to get through there because they're afraid of being fired upon. And so you have this backlog there where oil is not getting through. Also, fertilizer goes through there. So there's a whole nother, it could be a whole nother video here about how fertilizer not getting to market affects growing and things like that. And it's going to drive prices up at the supermarket, as well as prices being driven up at the pump for all of us, okay? And who does that affect? You and me. These are things that are not even in your control, but when you go to the pump, you're paying higher prices. When you go to the grocery store, you're paying higher prices. I don't know about you, but I'm paying higher prices on insurance. I'm paying higher prices on my utilities. I'm paying higher prices on my trash pickup and water, everything, okay? I'm paying higher prices on, and you are paying higher prices on. We're in the same boat that way, okay? There's also things happening to you, or may be happening to you, like a job loss, okay? You may be listening to my videos or have someone else in your life that's taught you a little bit about finance, so maybe you had some savings when you were laid off, but your layoff lasted longer than what you thought. Maybe it didn't last 3 or 6 months. It lasted 9 months to a year where you were applying for job after job, but nothing stuck. You just did not find a job within a period of a whole year. So you ran through all of your savings and you're in a very, very tough spot now. That is something that can happen that's somewhat out of your control, or a medical, something medical happened to you, an injury or something like that has you out of work and not bringing in what you brought in before. And it's something that's kind of totally out of your control. And those sort of things do happen. But now we're going to shift to the things that were in your control, okay? Where you just haven't taken the steps to actually prepare for what's going on. I'm going to digress a little bit to give you an analogy, okay? My wife and I, probably just like you, will travel by car sometimes. We live in Texas, okay? And there are small towns in Texas as you're driving. We live in the Rio Grande Valley. So as we're going up and going to areas like San Antonio or Houston or Dallas, okay, as we're going towards that area, we'll move through very, very small towns. And we may come to a city that's a little bit larger. But what always happens is once we get past that lonely road and we're moving in to a larger city, we might turn off the radio. We might get to the point to where we're looking at our navigation a little bit more because we know it's going to be busier. There's going to be more traffic and that sort of thing. Let's say that we're in a town like Fort Worth, Texas. It's a big town, but it's maybe not as big as a Houston or a Dallas, okay? Let's say that you're in Fort Worth traffic at the time. Well, yes, you're going to get to be more alert. You're going to pay attention to what's going on because there's traffic. There's people who may not be driving right, who may cut you off, and you need to be very, very vigilant about that driving situation, okay? That's kind of where we're at right now with the economy and everything that's going on. You need to start to get yourself ready. You need to be vigilant. You need to be preparing a plan and a way to actually deal with these challenges, because guess what's coming up after Fort Worth, okay? You're gonna have Dallas that's even bigger, that has the tall skyscraper buildings and everything, and has rush hour traffic that is just white knuckle, where you need to have your hands on the wheel, need to be actually paying attention to what's going on. That's what I see in the future of our economy. What if this excursion, this what looks like a war to me in Iran, drags on and on? Gas prices keep going up. The economy keeps having issues. The consumer sentiment, where people are tightening their belt so they aren't going out to the stores and the restaurants and so on. So that domino effect is happening in the economy where you may not be getting the hours that you were getting before, or worse, the business or whatever you're affiliated with that gives you employment can no longer make it. And maybe you're a future layoff. That's where we're headed. We're headed to that Dallas traffic that, where it's overwhelming what's going on. I think that we're headed in that direction. I'll often say that if you were to kind of tie me up and tell me that, hey, you have to tell me what's going on with the economy, I think that we're headed towards recession if we aren't in a recession already. So you need to get ready. You need to get prepared. You need to not be an ostrich with your head in the sand. You need to engage your critical thinking, which I'll digress to actually go into something else. There's folks who are just unplugging their critical thinking completely. I think about politics. There are folks that just blindly support the president and the current administration. There's also people who just blindly are totally against the president and the administration. Let's go on the side of the folks who are just behind the administration no matter what. It doesn't even matter what they thought before this particular president and administration we're in. They may have had a worldview and everything, and their morals, their religious beliefs, and everything. And whatever the president says and the administration or does, they just change whatever their worldview, philosophy, and everything is, and just go with what the president says without having critical thinking. The problem with that is that you aren't going through an evaluation process. I don't care what your politics are, whether you agree with the president, the current president and the administration, or you disagree with them. You need to engage your critical thinking. You need to think about all of the gray areas, the advantages and disadvantages of what's going on now, how that affects you and how you're going to navigate it. I look at gas prices with this particular excursion or war, if you're going to call it that. How are you going to react to that? What is it that you put in place to where you can deal with that? And evaluate yourself. What's going on with you? I'm thinking about some words that start with the letter P that are insane thought processes that are keeping you from being able to weather this storm that's coming financially, okay? One is pride. Do you have pride to where you got to drive a brand new car because you're concerned with what other people think? I'm in my 97 Honda Civic right now as I'm filming this with the ceiling here that's dropping down that I'm going to get fixed in the future. I'm looking at the odometer, almost 300,000 miles on this car. Highly reliable, highly affordable for me. Do you really think that I care what you think about this car or what anybody else thinks about this car? No, it's transportation and it's paid for. So I have margin in my budget to be able to deal with what's coming. And if your pride is getting you to think that a new car is necessary for you to do well, and you're thinking about what others think of you, you need to lower that pride. Be willing to drive something that is affordable and reliable for you, that gives you some room to react to what's coming up. So get rid of that pride, okay? Get rid of that thinking that all of the bills that you have are okay. It's not. If you got a bunch of streaming services and you're broke and you're nowhere near prepared for what's coming out, you need to turn off those streaming services. If you have a phone plan that's a Cadillac phone plan rather than a discount phone plan like I use Mint Mobile, and you're paying the premium prices for a premium phone plan, it's time to take a look at a better, lower, less expensive phone plan. If you're eating out all the time, maybe you're going to brown bag it to work. Do something different. You can do that. You just have to get serious and actually get in that mind frame to do things differently. So let go of pride, okay? And then you also want to look at being persistent, developing a plan for your money. We talked about that in a lot of different videos, but you want to start to save and to have reserves to deal with what's coming up. And you also want to think about if you are in the blessed situation to where you do have things like debts paid off. That's the other thing. If you have debts paid off and you actually have some money saved, think about your long-term future, okay? Think more long-term rather than short-term. And what are you going to do when you get to that opportunity and options phase, what a lot of people call retirement? Do you have enough saved and invested to actually live with dignity in your retirement? You need to be thinking about all of these things and not have those insane thoughts of pride and not having the persistence, the consistency, because whatever plan that you have is going to be long term. I don't think that we're going to get out of this situation with this excursion or this war anytime soon. I think we're going to be dealing with this for a while. And if we're not, great. I hope that I'm wrong, that it's short term, but I don't think that it's going to be short term. Think about the challenges that you've had this year alone, and think about 2 years ago where you were at. Is it more challenging for you now, or was it more challenging then? For most people that I speak to and that I see, it's more challenging now. So you got to think long term. We're probably going to be in this for a while. You want to make a plan. Unplug from spending money on things that are not necessary. Get transportation and maybe even housing that you can afford. That might be difficult to do, but at least get it in your mindset, in your critical thinking, that you're going to move in the direction of having a more affordable lifestyle so that you can move forward and navigate what we have coming, okay? There's insane things going out there, but make sure that your mindset is not an insanity mindset where you're living above your means and you're not taking steps to get in a place to where you can afford the lifestyle that you're living in, and put together a plan that actually gets rid of debt, that gets you some cash reserves on hand, and gets you to the point to where you're actually building wealth by investing. I hope this is helpful. Again, if you find my content valuable, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. Thanks again for listening, and God bless.